My father taught me how to hunt. I just never thought I'd become his prey. I crouched in the darkness of our old farmhouse, my back pressed tight against the kitchen wall. Every muscle in my body was tense to keep from trembling. The floorboards creaked with my father's slow, predatory steps somewhere in the hallway. He was whistling a Tunisian old lullaby he used to hum when I was little now, warped into a terrifying melody echoing through the shadows. In his hands, I glimpsed the hunting rifle he'd once taught me to shoot. Now he intended to use that very gun on me. My heart slammed against my ribcage as I struggled to stay quiet. The man who raised me, who I once adored, was stalking me like an animal. If he found me, I knew he would pull the trigger without hesitation. Just a week ago, I could never have imagined things would come to this. Back then, life with Dad was simple. We lived in a creaky old farmhouse on the edge of the woods, just outside a town so small everyone knew everyone. After Mom died in a car accident 5 years ago, it had been just the two of us. Dad did his best to raise me the only way he knew how. He was quiet, old-fashioned, and strict at times, but I always believed he was a good man. He taught me how to shoot a rifle, how to fish, how to stand on my own 2 feet. We weren't wealthy or educated or particularly interesting to anyone else, but we were a family. Dad never liked to talk about Mom or the past. When I was younger, I sometimes heard him awake in the middle of the night, pacing the living room or muttering as if arguing with someone who wasn't there. He had his quirks too, a padlock on the old garden shed out back that I was never allowed to open, and a fierce protectiveness that meant I had a strict curfew and few close friends. I figured he was just a tough love kind of parent, trying to keep me safe. I had no idea what he was hiding. All of that changed on one hot August night, exactly 1 week ago. I awoke past midnight to the distant creak of our back screen door. Groggy, I slid out of bed and peered through my window. In the moonlight, I saw Dad in the field behind the house, heading toward the tree line with a shovel in one hand and a large, lumpy tarp dragged behind him. My heart gave a lurch. I quietly slipped out of my room, down the stairs, and out the front door, careful not to make a sound. Keeping my distance, I followed him into the tall grass. Dad stopped near an old oak tree at the edge of the woods. There was a fresh hole in the ground beside him. My blood turned to ice as I watched him roll the tarp into the pit. Something limp and human-shaped slid out. In the faint glow of his flashlight, I caught a glimpse of a pale arm tumbling free of the canvas. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. Dad was burying a body. A twig snapped under my foot. Dad's head jerked up. I dropped flat in the grass, heart in my throat. His flashlight beam sliced over the field, searching. After a tense moment, he must have decided it was nothing. He turned back and hurriedly shoveled dirt over the tarp. As soon as his back was turned, I crept away, then broke into a sprint toward the house. I slipped in through the kitchen door as quietly as possible and flew up the stairs to my room. Collapsing onto my bed, I trembled uncontrollably. My mind raced with denial and terror. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe it was just a deer he was burying. But I knew what I'd seen. The cloying smell of raw decay still clung to my nostrils. That was no deer. I must have lain there for hours, adrenaline pulsing and thoughts churning. Sometime before dawn, I heard Dad's heavy footsteps on the stairs. I shut my eyes and pretended to be fast asleep as my bedroom door creaked open. In the darkness, I sensed him standing in the doorway, watching me. I held my breath and lay as still as possible. After a long moment, the door gently clicked shut, and I heard his footsteps retreat down the hall. Only then did I allow the silent tears to come. I knew what I needed to do, but I was more afraid than I'd ever been in my life. I woke late the next morning to the smell of bacon and eggs frying downstairs. For a split second, I hoped the night before had been just a bad dream, until I saw the dirt caked under my fingernails and remembered everything in a nauseating rush. In the kitchen, Dad greeted me with a faint smile, as if it were any other Saturday. "Morning, sport," he said, sliding a plate of eggs onto the table. I mumbled a reply and sat down, forcing myself to appear normal even as my insides clenched with fear. Dad looked tired, but there was something steely in his eyes. I wondered if he somehow knew that I knew. He cleared his throat casually as he poured himself a cup of coffee. "Heard coyotes getting into something out back last night," he said, not meeting my eye. "I went out to chase 'em off. Ended up having to bury a deer carcass near the woods. Sorry if I woke you." I gripped my fork tightly under the table. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck, but I managed to keep my voice steady. "I didn't hear anything, Dad," I murmured, staring down at my plate. "Good," he said, sipping his coffee. His eyes flicked up to examine my face. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Did he suspect I'd followed him? For a few minutes, we ate in heavy silence. I could barely choke anything down, but I forced myself to swallow a few bites. After breakfast, Dad pushed back from the table. "Gotta head into town for a bit," he said gruffly. "Bill Matheson's tractor is stuck again, and he needs a hand. You gonna be all right here on your own for a few hours?" I nodded quickly. "Yeah, I'll be fine," I replied. My attempt at a calm tone came out thin and unconvincing. Dad lingered, his keys jangling in his hand. He gave me a long, searching look. "You sure you're okay, son? You look a little pale." "Just didn't sleep well," I said, managing a weak smile. "Bad dreams." At that, something softer flickered across his expression, maybe regret. "Nightmares, huh? Sorry to hear that," he muttered. He opened the front door, then paused. "I'll be back by supper," he said, before stepping outside. I watched from the window as his rusty pickup rumbled down the dirt road and disappeared around a bend. Only when I was certain he was gone did I allow my legs to give out. I half fell against the counter, breathing hard. I had a few hours at most until he returned. My first impulse was to run out of the house and never look back, but who would believe me if I did? The local sheriff was Dad's fishing buddy. Without proof, I'd be dismissed as a kid with an overactive imagination. No, running wasn't an option. I needed evidence and help. With trembling hands, I texted my best friend, Ryan, to come over immediately. Come quick. Urgent. I didn't explain why. I just knew I couldn't face this alone, and Ryan was the only person I trusted with my life. He showed up less than 20 minutes later, out of breath and clearly worried. I met him in the yard and immediately pulled him toward the back of the house, my words tumbling out in an anxious whisper. I told him I suspected Dad was in serious trouble, that I thought he'd hurt someone. Ryan's eyes widened, but he didn't doubt me for a second. He just swallowed hard and said, "Tell me what we need to do." Together, we grabbed a crowbar from the garage and ran to the padlocked shed out back. My heart was drumming as we jammed the crowbar into the rusty lock. It took both of us and a few hard heaves, but the hasp finally snapped and the padlock clattered to the ground. I yanked the shed doors open and we slipped inside, pulling them shut behind us. A rancid, musty odor hit us in the dim light. Using our phone flashlights, we quickly scanned the interior. At first glance, it looked like a normal tool shed until my beam landed on a shovel propped in the corner. The blade was stained a brownish red. My stomach flipped. Ryan's light passed over an axe leaning against the wall, its edge caked with what looked like dried blood. He sucked in a sharp breath. "Oh my God! Jack, what is this?" he whispered, voice quavering. I didn't answer. Moving deeper inside, I spotted a wooden footlocker chest tucked under a shelf. I flipped it open and inside was exactly what I'd feared. A stash of personal items that clearly didn't belong to us. Muddy wallets, driver's licenses, and credit cards from names I didn't recognize. A pink scarf, stained nearly brown with old blood. At the top of the pile lay a silver locket. I reached in with trembling fingers and lifted it out. I had given it to her for Mother's Day the year she died. Dried blood was smeared across the engraved rose design. Ryan stared at the grisly collection, his face ashen. This is evidence, he murmured. Your dad, He didn't get to finish. The shed door suddenly swung open behind us, flooding the space with late morning sun. We whirled around, blinking in the glare. Dad stood in the doorway, home early, shotgun in hand. His face was unreadable, but his eyes blazed when they saw the open footlocker and the locket in my hand. Time seemed to freeze. I felt Ryan at my side, his hands raised reflexively. "Mr. Walker, please," he began in a shaky voice. My father didn't hesitate. The shotgun roared, deafening in the tight shed. Ryan's chest erupted in a spray of red, and he collapsed to the floor without a sound. "No!" I screamed, the word tearing from my throat. I lunged toward Ryan as he crumpled, but a heavy blow from the butt of the shotgun smashed into the side of my head. An explosion of pain burst in my skull. I fell to the ground next to my friend's body, stars dancing in my vision. Before I could comprehend anything beyond the agony, everything went black. I woke with my head throbbing and the taste of blood in my mouth. It was dusk, the shed interior dim in the last light of day. I found myself tightly bound to a wooden chair that had been braced against one of the shed's support posts. Coarse rope dug into my wrists behind me and strapped my ankles to the chair legs. I could barely move. Ryan's lifeless body lay on the dirt floor a few feet away, eyes staring at nothing. A sob rose in my throat at the sight, and I bit it back. Dad stood a few paces in front of me, calmly wiping down his shotgun with an oily rag. In the dying light, his face was eerily composed, but I could see his jaw clenching and a muscle ticking in his temple. "You weren't supposed to see this, Jack," he said softly without looking at me. "Dad," I croaked, my throat raw. You killed Ryan. And Mom, you killed her too, didn't you?" The accusations poured out of me, full of horror and hurt. "How could you? Why, Dad? How many people have you?" He closed his eyes at my barrage of questions. "Too many," he muttered, voice heavy with remorse. "More than I can count." He finally met my gaze, and I saw tears glistening in his eyes. "Everything I did for you, for us. You have to understand after your mum. I lost my way, but I never wanted to hurt you, son. If you ever loved us, then why did you kill Mom?" I cried out, choking on tears. It felt like my heart was ripping in two. He bowed his head, a tear rolling down his cheek. "She found out about everything," he whispered. "She said she'd take you and go to the police." We argued. I never meant for it to happen, but I couldn't let her do that. I couldn't lose you, Jack. I felt like I might vomit. It was true, my mother hadn't died in an accident at all. My father had murdered her to keep his own secrets. My stomach heaved with grief and disgust. "Dad, please," I begged shakily. "Stop this. Turn yourself in. We can get you help. I won't tell them anything if you just stop now." He let out a hollow laugh and wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "It's far too late for that." Slowly, he pulled a long hunting knife from the sheath at his belt. In the dim shed, the blade gleamed as he stepped behind me. His voice turned cold and resolute. "And I can't let you tell anyone what you found," he murmured. "I am sorry, Jackie." My blood turned to ice. The flat of the blade brushed against the side of my neck as he positioned it. His free hand gripped a fistful of my hair in a gesture almost like a caress. "This is the last thing I ever wanted," Dad murmured, his voice breaking. "But I have no choice." In that split second, a burst of clarity shot through me. I realized my hands had worked partway free of the rope it must have loosened when the chair shifted. It was now or never. With a desperate scream, I wrenched my wrists free and hurled myself sideways, toppling the chair with me. The knife whistled past my ear, slicing only empty air where my neck had been an instant before. I hit the floor hard on my shoulder. The chair crashed down beside me, splintering apart. Ignoring the flare of pain, I kicked free of the remaining ropes and staggered to my feet. "Jack!" my father roared, lunging toward me. I bolted out the shed door and into the cool twilight, adrenaline lending wings to my feet. The farmhouse was only 20 yards away. I sprinted for it, legs pumping, tears streaming down my face. Behind me, I heard Dad cursing and the scrape of his boots giving chase. I flew up the back porch steps and tore open the kitchen door. I threw myself inside and slammed it shut, fumbling to click the lock in place. My breath came in ragged gasps. A second later, the doorknob rattled violently. A heavy blow struck the door, then another, each hit splintering the flimsy wood. He was going to break in. Heart pounding, I stumbled back. My eyes fell on the side table by the pantry where Dad kept his revolver for snakes and pests. I yanked the drawer open and my trembling hand closed around the cold metal of the handgun. I ducked behind the kitchen counter, trying to steady my shaking hands. I heard his boots thud over the threshold as he forced his way inside. Over the sound of my own frantic breathing, I could hear him softly whistling that damned lullaby, again the same eerie tune as before as his footsteps crept closer. Without warning, a thunderous blast shattered the silence, blowing apart the cabinet above me. Wood splinters rained down on my back. He was firing blindly into the kitchen, trying to flush me out. I clenched my jaw, wiping sweat and sawdust from my eyes. I had only one chance now. As he pumped the shotgun to chamber the next round, I rose from behind the counter. I braced both hands on the revolver, arms locked straight. My father loomed at the opposite end of the kitchen, not 10 feet away. His eyes widened when he saw me standing there, aiming the gun at his chest. In that moment, he didn't look like the boogeyman or a murderous monster, he just looked sad. "Jack," he rasped, almost a plea. Tears blurred my vision, but my hands were steady for the first time all night. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I remembered how he'd taught me to take a deep breath and squeeze the trigger gently. "I'm sorry," I whispered and squeezed the trigger. The revolver bucked in my grip with a deafening roar. In the muzzle flash, I saw Dad's face etched with sorrow and a kind of twisted pride. He staggered back as the bullet struck him square in the chest. A crimson stain blossomed on his shirt, and the shotgun fell from his hands, clattering to the floor. "Dad!" I cried, rushing toward him as his back hit the wall. He slid down to the floor, leaving a dark smear of blood on the faded wallpaper. I fell to my knees at his side and caught him under the shoulders before he could slump over. His eyes searched for mine, wet with tears and shock. He opened his mouth to speak, but only a strangled cough came out, flecking his lips with blood. I pressed my hand over the wound, desperately trying to staunch the bleeding. "Hang on, Dad. Please," I begged, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm here. I'm right here." His trembling hand grasped weakly at my arm. His eyes were filled with regret and love and pain all at once. "Sorry," he gasped. A sob racked through me. "I know," I choked out. His bluish lips twitched into a faint smile, the same lopsided smile I remembered from better days. "So proud of you," he whispered, barely audible. A tear rolled down his cheek. "Tell your mum I'm sorry." I nodded frantically, cradling his head against my chest. "I will," I cried. "I promise." His gaze drifted upward, towards something only he could see. His hand tightened slightly on my arm, then went limp. A long, rattling breath escaped him as his body sagged in my arms. My father was gone. I don't remember much of what happened next. At some point, red and blue lights flashed across the walls and voices were yelling. Neighbors had heard the gunshots and called the police. They found me in the kitchen, rocking back and forth on the floor, still clutching my father's lifeless body and bawling like a child. Strong arms pulled me away. Everything became a blur of sirens, radios, and concerned faces. I answered questions in a numb haze. Paramedics checked me over, and the police took my statement and whisked me to the station, though they treated me more like a victim than a suspect. By dawn, they'd confirmed what I already knew. Dad had been responsible for the string of disappearances that had haunted our county for years. The evidence in the shed and the shallow graves out back told the story for him. A week has passed since that night. It feels like a lifetime. I'm staying with my aunt in another town for now. People tell me I should be proud that I'm brave, even a hero, for surviving and putting an end to Dad's crimes. I don't feel like a hero. I feel like a kid who loved his father and got betrayed in the worst possible way. To the world, my father is a monster, and they're not wrong. But he was also the man who taught me to ride a bike and who read me bedtime stories when I was afraid of the dark. Both of those things are true, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to reconcile them. They say the sins of the father are visited upon the son. I've had nightmares that maybe some part of his darkness is inside me too. But in my heart, I know better. I'm not him, and I will not become him. My father's sins died with him that night. The violence, the lies, the fear, those chains are broken. Now it's just me, a little bruised, a lot broken, but alive. I have to believe that this horrifying chapter has ended, and that I'll somehow find a way to write a better future for myself. Whatever happens from here, one thing is certain. I'm free.